All right, in today's screencast, we're looking at cellular respiration. This is how plants and animals break down glucose in order to release energy and store it in the form of ATP for use in the cell. This is the overall picture of what happens. You have glucose being broken down, C6H12O6, adding some oxygen, and it releases water, carbon dioxide, and cell energy in the form of ATP. There are three main parts: glycolysis, which takes place in the cytoplasm, the Krebs cycle, which is in the mitochondria, the electron transport chain, also in the mitochondria. So look at each of these as a basic introduction in this screencast. Glycolysis again happens in the cytoplasm of the cell, and in it, glucose, a 6-carbon sugar, is broken down into three carbon molecules called pyruvate. It takes 2 ATP to begin this process, to invest 2 ATP, and then you get out 4 ATP for a net gain of 2 ATP. It also re-energizes NAD plus to NADH, which is used in the electron transport chain, so we'll see that one later. Again, this is the overall structure of glycolysis. Breaks down glucose to 2 pyruvates, which we'll use next in the Krebs cycle, and NADH, which will be used in the electron transport chain, and ATP, which is available now for use throughout the cell. That's glycolysis, step 1. Our next stop is the Krebs cycle. This happens in the mitochondria. And in this one, we have 2 pyruvates, which are put into this. It doesn't quite show them in this diagram, but in it, we recharge several NADHs, which again we'll use in the electron transport chain, and some ATP as well, which is available for use. In this process, the pyruvate molecules are broken down and left as a carbon and carbon dioxide as a waste product. So again, in glycolysis, we broke down glucose to 2 pyruvates. In the Krebs cycle, however, what we do is we take through this cycle. So I'm trying to change my pointer. It's not cooperating. Sorry. See these CO2s? This carbon is from the glucose molecule originally. So through the Krebs cycle, carbon dioxide is broken down, releases carbon, and the carbon there is released as a waste product, carbon dioxide. We recharge several NAD pluses, and we also recharge some ATP. Not very much ATP in comparison to what happens next in the electron transport chain. So in the electron transport chain, this is where we use the NADH molecules to recharge ATP by forming a proton gradient. H plus, hydrogen ion, is essentially just a proton floating around. So we use that to recharge a DP, adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphates with ATP. And through the electron transport chain, one glucose can generate up to 32 ATP. So this is where the energy happens. This is what makes eukaryotes, plants, animals, fungi, much more effective in harnessing energy than the bacteria and other anaerobes. Right? Anaerobes mean they don't use oxygen. So this electron transport chain, let's look and see how this looks. All right, in this, so it's a very complex thing. We're not going to worry about the names of all these proteins. It's a really involved, kind of a neat system. But essentially what happens is the NADHs drop off their hydrogens here, and these proton pumps push them up here. So this creates a really strong gradient. There's much more hydrogens up here, right, than there are on the other side. So the hydrogen just wants to get across this barrier, but it cannot. It's charged. It cannot move through a biological membrane. This is where this large protein comes into play, because this hydrogen is allowed to pass through it, but as it does, as it releases energy moving down this gradient, it recharges ADP to ATP, ATP being, remember, cell energy. This is where the energy happens. Right, so there's largely this ATP synthase, see that synth prefix, it makes it. It re-energizes ADP, which is this used up molecule of energy. All right, so this is the electron transport chain. The big thing here is the hydrogen ions, protons, are pushed up against the gradient, and they are used to recharge ATP, which is what cells use for their energy. All right, and again, it creates up to 34 ATP molecules. So remember, glycolysis produced 4, Krebs cycle produced, I think, another 2 or 3 or 4, and this one produced 32, so it's an order of magnitude more effective. But it takes a lot of these NADH molecules, which are what, remember, were recharged in the other parts of the cycle. So this is where we get the energy from. All right, and notice there's no carbon involved. We've used up our glucose and exhaled this carbon dioxide and wastewater. A few other things to note as I switch back to my pointer. All right, there's also anaerobic respiration. This happens in our cells when there's not enough oxygen available for immediate use. So if we are running or exercising or lifting something very heavy, we might exhaust the oxygen readily available to our muscles. So our muscles can kick into anaerobic respiration, where they can break down pyruvate to lactic acid, which releases 2 ATP. If you in sports, I've heard of lactic acid is the thing that makes your cells feel that burning soreness, and our textbook even talks about it. We got to correct that. That is inaccurate. We've known for about 30 years now that lactic acid is not the responsible thing for muscle cramps. We've proven we're not quite sure what exactly causes that sort of thing, but it's not lactic acid. It might be micro tears in the muscle. It might be something in the nervous system can hit them, but your textbook talked a lot about anaerobic respiration causing this without telling you what it was. All it is, anaerobic respiration, is this. Pyruvate is broken into lactic acid to produce 2 ATP, which is not the 32 that electron transport chain creates, but it's better than nothing, and it'll do for the short term while your body is pushing itself. Right? So we have that correction. It's embarrassing the book did that, but these things happen. And if you're curious, I do have some sources I could cite to help you understand more about it. All right, next up we have just kind of an overall view of what happens in cell respiration. We start with glycolysis, we have glucose. Glucose is broken down to pyruvate here, and the ATP from this is immediately available for the cell to use. It also recharges NADH, which is then carried over to the electron transport chain. And then in the Krebs cycle, this creates some more ATP, some more NADH, and also is where the glucose is used up and exhaled as carbon dioxide. So then we transfer some more NADH and FADH2. We are not too concerned about their structures other than they're the things that power electron transport chain. And this is where we get like 32 or so ATP. So it's an extremely effective method of getting energy out of these chemical bonds that plants put there through photosynthesis. Again, both plants and animals do cell respiration, not just animals. Plants need to break down the glucose they build to harness its energy. All right, so that is kind of the overview of cell respiration. There's a lot of material talked about in this section. So do your best to definitely reread it. We'll talk about it in class some as well. So it's a really interesting set of reactions, but it is very complicated. All right, if you have questions, please let me know, email me, or send me a note, or talk to me in class or on the floor. I think that's everything we needed to talk about for my scribbles. Okay, as always, hope you're doing great in your studies and see me with any questions.